Can you believe someone had the audacity to just disagree with us on LinkedIn?
Terrible day.
I can't. Who do these people think they are?
I don't know.
I put up a post on LinkedIn. It's a clip of one of our podcasts, and they disagree.
Oh my gosh.
There's no room for that.
We might as well pack it in.
There's no room for thoughtful, intelligent, principled consideration of ideas on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's not why I'm there. I'm not there to have a conversation. Let's get real. Right? Okay, I'm joking, obviously.
It was an interesting conversation. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
Well, it's funny because I had this conversation with a group of our clients earlier this week, because one of the fears around publishing on LinkedIn is, what if people hate me?
Yeah.
What if
no problem. Let me tell you how that goes.
Communicated by the tribe, right?
Yeah.
What if they label me a hack and they tell me I don't know what I'm doing and I never should have got out of bed in the morning, right? And so I had to have this whole conversation about, no, actually, as an expert, you want to seek out disagreement. You want to seek out principled, thoughtful disagreement. Yeah, don't let people attack you for no reason. Hopefully that's not happening to anybody, but thoughtful, principled disagreement, you should be seeking that out. And when I got it, I was very keen to engage with it. So here's what happened. We put up a podcast, I don't know, it's 3, 4, 5 episodes ago. And I think the title on the podcast player was A Problem of Problems. And the basic idea behind this message was that consultants have this funny habit of trying to convince clients that they have a problem. So a question that we often get is, well, I'm talking to these clients and I think they have a problem, but they don't seem to think they have a problem. So how do I convince them that they have a problem?
Yeah.
Our answer is, well, you don't, because nobody pays money to solve problems that you convince them that they had. If they don't see it for themselves, if they don't see some level of pain, if they don't experience some level of pain, they're not going to take out their checkbook and solve a problem because you said convincingly that they have a problem. And I got some pushback on this idea. And the pushback came from some thoughtful, bona fide experts in the space, right? And so therefore I took it seriously. And the pushback was, yeah, okay, but how consultants have typically earned revenue is in educating clients on problems that they were not aware of and helping them broaden their awareness to a broader set of problems, and then obviously helping solve those problems. In a traditional consulting firm environment, that's what happens. That's how consultants make money. Think about the big firms. Think about KPMG, Accenture, EY, Deloitte, etc. Right? McKinsey, BCG. They are actively educating their clients. They're actively calling the attention. Oh, this happened with another firm. This is happening in your industry. This is a trend that we're seeing. Here's a problem that we're noticing. And they're actively having those conversations with clients and therefore broadening the client's awareness of the problem set and then proposing work on the back of that. And that's factually true how the consulting industry has operated for a very long time. So there's this rub now. And I agree with that. That is practically what has happened. There's this rub now between, okay, so, when do you educate a client? And when are you just barking up the wrong tree because you're not going to see it your way?
Yeah. It's an interesting question. I think it almost has quite a very simple answer. So I'm going to say it and see what you think, which is you can do that. You can educate them when they'll listen to you. And so if you come in and you're the BCG who they've had a relationship with, who has solved other problems for them, they're primed to listen to you. If you're already working with them and you can see inside the organization, they're going to listen to you. If you've built some kind of, a strong relationship pre-engagement, maybe you've never worked with them, but you're in a place where they're willing to hear what you say and they're willing to hear it as something you're saying to benefit them as opposed to something that will benefit you, then you can say it. But to me, the mistake that a lot of consultants make is that they try to sell the thing, right? They try to make that point. They try to educate in a scenario where the perception that prospect has of you is that you are self-serving, is that you don't know their business, is that you don't have the right motivations. And so I think the answer is simple, and the answer is when they're in a real position to listen.
Yeah, and I think this speaks to also your authority when
Mhm.
you've earned the right to have that conversation, not only relationally, but also positionally.
Mhm.
So Ernst& Young, Deloitte, McKinsey, BCG, they have research departments.
Yeah.
They have teams of people that are dedicated to conducting research, identifying patterns, trends, opportunities, so on and so forth, right? And they have all this raw material, ammunition, if you will, that they can throw at a client to educate them on a problem. And what you might lack is not only the credible research, although you could certainly get that third party if it's available, but you might also lack the positioning. Because you know what I'm not interested in hearing about is a generalist jack of all trades consultant trying to educate me on a highly specialized problem. So if you haven't earned the right to claim specialization in a particular problem set, I don't really want to hear what you have to say about it. I don't really take your opinion all that seriously. And so this is a bit of a catch-22, right? Because you have to have some specialization around a problem set to develop positioning that gives you that authority. And then from that authority, on the back of that positioning, you can absolutely educate within that scope. So I think, why do people listen to this podcast? Because we have a certain level of authority that stems from what? Not because Carrie and I woke up in the morning brilliant, which doesn't always happen, right? Today
I
happens to be
did.
one of those days, but no, but because we've done a volume of work with B2B consultants in this space, solving certain problems. And that volume provides us credibility that we can use to educate you on things that you might not see. But if you don't have that credibility, you haven't done that volume of work, you don't have that positioning, you haven't earned the right to offer that kind of education.
Yeah. And just to layer on top of that, I think the other piece is you also need to be perceived as, because you are honestly selective about where you're applying that or suggesting that you can apply that solution. We don't tell every consultant that the thing that we do is the thing that's going to work for them, right? It's a particular consultant at a particular point in their business who has a particular need. And, people need to see you as someone who will turn them away if in fact you don't have the problem that they're solving. You can't be the person about whom they're thinking, okay, they're carrying a hammer, therefore everything looks like a nail. And so there are some layers here. And I think what's really important is to be really cognizant of what those layers are, so that when you are feeling the urge to educate somebody, you already know if this is a conversation that you can and should be having.
And I think there's an important distinction to be made between new clients and existing
Mhm.
clients.
Yeah.
Right. New clients hire you because there's some clear relevance between and resonance as well between what you do, that i.e. the problem that you specialize in solving and the problem that they have. That's
Mhm.
why they hire you. Clients want to hire somebody who is well versed in their problem, right? They do not want to hire, what are clients afraid of? They're afraid of hiring a jack of all trades consultant that's going to learn their problem on their dime.
Yeah.
Oh, this sounds like a fun project. Let me at it, right? No client wants that. They want to know that you've done it before. And that's why specialization and positioning at large is so important. Now, once you've got a client, and this goes back to the relationship point that you made, once you've got a client, you've got a relationship, they trust you, you solved one problem or one element of a problem effectively. Do you now have the relational authority to be able to educate them on a broader set of clients now that there's a level of trust built in? Absolutely.
Mhm.
So the way that you approach this between new clients, who don't have any prior working experience with you versus existing clients who have a ton of trust with you is very different. You have more leeway to educate the client in an existing client relationship where there's a track record that's been established.
Mhm. And in the end, I mean, I think in that podcast, we talked about the fact that, a prospect will hire you to solve a problem that is keeping them awake at night, right? The thing that they're thinking about all the time. And so it's also important to recognize that when you're educating someone about a problem that you see, it still requires them to get to that point. It's not just you saying, "Hey, I see this other problem. Shall we fix it?" Right? That's very rarely what will happen because they still need to make that emotional and gut connection to the problem so that they feel it to the extent that they're now willing to invest in solving it. Especially true now, right? Budgets are tight. People aren't just throwing money around. You need to also recognize that that's a process. And often we talk to consultants who think, well, I pointed it out to them. I don't understand why they don't get it, right? Why don't they just see it? I told them it's there. And so this goes back to just understanding the psychology of the decision maker and, recognizing all of the gates that need to be passed for someone to make a decision, make an investment, to get into some kind of agreement with somebody who's going to work on their problem for them.
So let me give us two applied scenarios where this kind of problem education does make sense. The argument that we made in that previous episode was, well, if they don't agree, if they can't attest, if they can't admit that the problem exists, then you are largely wasting your time, and you ought to go find more clients, more prospects, have more conversations, and find the folks who do have the problem. The argument was stop barking up the wrong trees, right? And especially when your network is limited, you've got 10 trees to bark up, right? And they're not working. Go find another 90, because in that other 90, there may be some trees that are worth barking up, i.e. the clients that have the problems that you solve. And so that to me remains kind of first principles. Now, where does it make sense, though, as an exception to that rule, to dig in, to educate, right? Because at the same time, there is tons of evidence to suggest that consultants who are offering education and new perspectives do convert and do close and win more deals, right? So when does it make sense to educate on the problem? And I'm going to give you two scenarios where it makes sense. The first is where the client acknowledges the symptoms of the problem. So they can speak to you at a level they understand, and the level they understand is symptomatic. When you go into the doctor, you don't know what's going on underneath the surface. You haven't done blood work. You haven't done all these things or tests, but you can admit, you can profess that I'm feeling this way, right? And by professing those symptoms, you're bought into some kind of a remedy, right? Doctor runs some tests, and now they can explain to you the mechanism. They're a good doctor, right? Well, here's what's happening. Your blood work came back. This is what's happening in these organs, whatever. There's a mechanistic explanation. What's happening, you're now being educated on how those symptoms are showing up, why they're showing up, what's the mechanism or the root cause underneath the symptoms that's driving how you're feeling. So if a client is expressing some symptoms and there's pain around those symptoms, absolutely, you are allowed to and should. This is what good consultants do. You should educate them on the mechanisms that are driving those symptoms, or the root causes that are driving those symptoms, and then propose a way forward to solve those root causes. That's what consultants do, I think, really. We don't always explain it that way, but that's what we do. That's the first scenario. And the second scenario is what you referred to, Carrie, where they just might not feel it yet. They might not be there yet. And I think it's important to acknowledge that even if you are successful in pointing at a problem the client wasn't previously aware of, they don't knee-jerk to working with you to solving it. Right? The client's knee-jerk reaction to acknowledging that there's a problem, even if you're successful in doing so, is, okay, well, we'll take it back. We'll take a look at it. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. We'll make some attempts, right? There's always some kind of, in any client environment, there's some kind of internal attempt that takes place before we decide to dedicate the resources to hiring a consultant to do it for us. Yeah. And so sometimes that problem education could still be valuable as long as you acknowledge that the deal might not proceed right away. They'd have to go through, a process of trying something internally, failing, feeling the pain of the problem that you pointed out to them, and then having the motivation to come back to you to solve it. And that might take some time. Doesn't mean it's not worth it, but it might not be the immediate deal you're looking for.
And practically what this means is there's a lot of benefit to you in being really clear on where your prospects are across this buyer journey, right? For you to know, okay, here's my list of people who know they have the problem, believe they have the problem. They're just looking for who's going to help them solve the problem. That's sort of one list, right? Then we have the list of people who understand that they have the symptoms. They haven't quite figured out what it means yet. They need a certain kind of education. Then you have the people who maybe don't quite realize it yet, for whom you can do this, this sort of earlier stage education. And when you can start to, you know, split your clients in or your prospects into those tranches and then understand the work that needs to happen is different in each case. And to your point, the timeline is different. And so that allows you to A, do the right thing in terms of the kinds of conversations that you're having with them, and B, set your own expectations to a place where they make sense, right? If you're introducing a problem to somebody on Monday, of course, they're not going to close, you're not going to close that deal by Friday. That's a very different timeline than the prospect that already gets it, right? Who is simply looking for, who's the consultant going to be who helps me with this.
And tell them where they are,
Yes.
right? Once you've been able to map them on a journey, tell them where they are, right? There's so much trust that's built in saying, look, you're pretty early. In my experience, you're going to start dealing with this problem pretty soon. I'm not sure you're seeing it yet. Here are some things to look out for. Here's some things that you might see on this path to getting this particular outcome or goal or target that you're trying to achieve. I don't think you're there yet. You don't need us for sure yet. But when you get to this stage and then describe it to them and you're seeing these problems, might make sense to call us. There's so much trust that's built in telling people, oh, you don't need us right now, but you might, and here's when. And then describing that scenario to them so that when they're there, they go, oh, yeah, they told us this might happen.
Yeah.
And then, in fact, they didn't try to push us into something or convince us that that wouldn't do them right away or that there was an immediate problem. They just, in a very detached way, educated us on what might happen, and now it's happening. Now I trust them. Let's go back and have that conversation.
Yeah, and imagine the credibility you're building on two fronts, right? One is exactly what you said. You didn't push it. You sort of pushed them away. You explained it to them. But the second is you've now demonstrated to them that you understand this problem so well that you can predict exactly how it's going to play out, right? And what can be better than that?